Hi, it's Dr. Steve, and welcome back to our online classes. In today's class, let's take a look at questioning techniques. In particular, let's take a look at effective questioning techniques, and then let's talk about a very important topic, which is wait time when you are implementing questioning in your classroom. One of the first questioning techniques we'll talk about is asking a question before you call on a student. Many teachers, especially new teachers, sometimes end up calling on the student first. Johnny, here's a question for you, type of thing. Now, the thought on that is, if you do that, you're now going to take everybody else kind of off the hook for having to think about and prepare a response for that question. So think about doing the opposite. Think about asking the question, so pose it, pause, and allow all students to think, and then call upon an individual student. When you're calling on students, think about using some random selection technique. And I'm going to talk about a couple of apps and introduce some thoughts about using apps to help you as a technology tip in a few moments. But think about using random selection, because again, this randomness helps motivate students to stay focused on the discussion and on your lecture. And also, in terms of classroom management, it will reduce off-task behavior, because students know that at any point you could call on them. So what's your position on raising hands? Are you going to require students to raise their hands, or are you just going to call on them, or are you going to mix it up and do a little bit of both? Here are a couple of thoughts. When you're doing lecture or direct instruction, maybe don't require students to raise hands at that time. Instead, just call on a student quickly. As we looked at in our last online class, and when we were looking at improving lectures in face-to-face classes, we were talking about making sure that you don't spend so much time on individual questions that you take students kind of out of the rhythm of the lecture and the instruction that's going on. So one thought is, during lecture, just call on somebody. Now, when you're trying to promote a discussion with students, or when you're doing not teacher-centered activities, but rather student-centered instruction, like constructivist instruction, consider asking students to raise their hands at that time, because then that's going to help you mediate a conversation. You're going to prompt it, you're going to spark it along, and help to guide it. By asking students to raise their hands during those times, you're also showing respect for students who, at that time, whatever the issue is, maybe they don't care to just share their ideas at that point, or their thoughts or opinions. So you can show respect for students in that way. So in general, think about what your stance is on raising hands, and think about maybe using on purpose different techniques at different times. Another effective questioning technique is, especially if you are employing more open-ended questions rather than closed questions, would be to follow up on student responses. Can you encourage a student to clarify their initial response? So ask something like, could you clarify that? Could you tell us a little more about that? Can you explain it just a little more for us? You could ask a student to expand upon a response that they give. So for example, you could say, could you tell us a little more about this? Can you describe this more in depth? You can also ask a student to support his or her point of view. Can you defend your position? Can you provide some supportive evidence? What are you basing your response on? Could you tell us more about that? One thing that a teacher does not want to do while asking questions is to make fun of students or make them feel like, well, maybe I'm not safe to express my thoughts. It's okay to make mistakes. We're in a learning environment. So consider celebrating mistakes. So don't tease a student. Also, acknowledge your own mistakes. Show that, hey, we all make mistakes, and that's part of the learning process in life. Also, be careful not to just give away answers, especially to closed questions. Sometimes teachers do this through nonverbal activities that they're doing. And sometimes teachers are just interested in kind of keeping everything moving, so they even give the answer. So be careful not to do that. Allow time so students can think, allow students to properly respond. Be careful that you're not a hand chaser, so to speak, teacher. In other words, don't just call on those who are volunteering, because after a while, some students will be monopolizing the question answering process or the discussion that you're holding. So consider not just calling on volunteers, and look around the room, because remember, part of questioning is to assess how students are doing and keep gauging, are they understanding, are they acquiring the information. So watch for nonverbal cues from your students. Really take a look at them. Does somebody look like they're not understanding something? Are they perplexed? Do they look concerned? Are they going off task? Is someone raising a hand partially and then putting it back down? So call on non-volunteers. Here's a technology tip. Consider using an electronic app to support fairly calling on students. Now, you certainly want to be fair and you want to be able to call on everybody in the class, but also equally important is you want to support the impression that you are fair to your students. I'm always known for saying that student perception to them is reality, practically speaking. So let me briefly mention two apps that could help you support questioning in your classroom. Now, this first one is called StickPick. It's about $4 at the recording of this video. Right now, it's available on iOS. It may be available on Android down the road. This app allows you to randomly select students, and it's using the traditional metaphor of teachers having an old coffee can, and they would, in the old days, so to speak, would take popsicle sticks and they would mark the names of students on these sticks, and they would just randomly kind of shuffle them around a little bit and choose one of the sticks and then put that stick on the side, and that would be a way to ensure that they're asking questions of all the students. So this app works very much in the same type of way, but it also adds some extra pieces to it, which are really helpful. It allows you to enter student names. Okay, well, we're going to do that in order to get the names on the popsicle sticks, but it also allows you to specify the level of ability of each individual student according to Bloom's revised taxonomy. So you could say this student is really working at the understanding level only. This student is working at the analysis level. And then when you choose a student's name, it's going to show you what level that they're at. And then it can also provide question stems to guide you in preparing questions for individual students. Again, it's random, but when the random name comes up, it'll say, well, this student, Mary, is working at this level, and here are a series of type questions that you could pose to Mary. So very interesting. For about $4, it's a really good app. Another positive app, which is free in this case, but it does offer some in-app purchases, it's called Popsicle Sticks. It's a simple app. It does the same thing as the StickPick that we just took a look at. In addition to that, this app allows you to quickly create random groups. You can say, I want 4 groups, or I want groups of 3 people, and it'll quickly prepare that for you. It also allows easy grading of student participation in a discussion according to a rubric that you can enter. I'm posting a class resource on Blackboard it'll be a brief video, and it's going to show you how to use the more advanced app here, StickPick. Another important effective questioning technique that oftentimes is overlooked in the United States is wait time. American teachers typically do not allow enough time for students to think and also to formulate a response when the teacher asks questions. So we need to allow sufficient time for students to think. Americans seem to be increasingly impatient. To illustrate this point, think about when you're in Mercy Hall and you are looking to take the elevator upstairs to a class. If you're waiting for the elevator, even if you see a group of people already standing there, someone probably has already pressed the button to call for the elevator, are you tempted to press the button also? And if the elevator doesn't arrive in a very short period of time, are you tempted to press the button several times? You know that this really does not speed up the elevator. Somebody has already placed the call by pressing the button. The point here is Americans typically seem to be impatient. And we also take that into the classroom when we're asking questions of our students. When we are referring to wait time, we're talking about the time between when you pose a question and you call on a student and that student answers. According to Duplass, how many seconds do you estimate that the average American, German, and Japanese teacher provides wait time before either calling on someone else or providing the answer or prompting the student more about the answer? It may surprise you. German teachers, according to Duplass, wait on average about 7 seconds. Japanese teachers wait about, on average, 11 seconds. So where do you think we fall in this country? Research suggests about 2 seconds. So again, why are we doing this? Well, we want to provide enough time for students to formulate answers and to process the information, to have to think through everything when we pose a question. So the bottom line here is, after asking a question, plan to wait at least 5 seconds before either speaking or taking any action. Now, I know that that's going to be an awkward silence at first. It's going to be the pregnant pause. It's going to be that time where it seems like an eternity. But do it. So one thing we can do in fields is when we pose a question to students, let's count it silently, of course. So however you like to count, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or however you want to do that, but allow 5 seconds and then see what kind of results happen from that. So let's take a look at some of the results from research. There are many positive results that can happen when you allow sufficient wait time after you pose questions to your students. According to Duplass, he suggests that, first of all students are motivated to prepare and to develop answers. Because you could then call on anyone and you're allowing that time for them to prepare these answers. Also, length and the correctness of responses tends to increase. The I don't know responses tend to go down. The number of volunteers who are willing to take a stab at responding to that question tends to increase. Further, student confidence in their responses tends to increase. Overall, then, teachers find that scores on academic tests tend to increase. Teachers also change as a result of this, according to Duplass. Teachers tend to ask more higher level questions. The classroom changes. It becomes a little more quiet, a little more civil, a better community of learning. And students ultimately become more active agents in their own learning because they are now processing more than what they would have had you not increased your wait time. Even if you make the conscious effort as a teacher to increase wait time after you pose questions to your students, you still may end up with a student saying, I don't know. According to Knight, he says, here's a technique that you could implement to try to eliminate and to indicate to students, I don't know is not an acceptable answer. He says step one is to repeat the question again. So you pose a question, and the student says, I don't know. So you repeat the question again. If they still say, I don't know, or don't respond, you're allowing wait time in here, you then rephrase that question. Just simply restate it using some different words, because maybe they're not fully understanding what you mean. So in other words, you're going to explain it just a little bit more by rephrasing it. Number three, Knight says, reduce the question. In other words, ask a smaller version of it. Let's take part of this question. Can you answer this section of it instead of taking the entire question? And his step number four is to reach out. Allow a student to call on someone else to help. Sometimes we've seen this strategy on some game shows, the phone a friend strategy. Let's see it in action. So the teacher asks a question of the class and says, what are the subject and predicate of this particular sentence? Teacher allows sufficient wait time. The teacher calls on a student. The student says, I don't know. Okay, let me repeat the question. What are the subject and predicate of this sentence? Right. I allow a little wait time. Student still says, I don't know. Okay, you know what, let me rephrase this question. Every sentence has an action and also a noun that will do that action. What are those elements in this sentence? The student says, I'm not sure, I don't know. Okay, let's reduce this question down a little bit. Let's look for one part of the question. What are the verbs or the action word or words in this sentence? All right, this student still says, I don't know. Okay, I'm still not letting you off the hook. You can now reach out to someone else. Would you like to call on someone to help you respond to this question? You see, in this process, not only are you telling students that it's like I'm going to get an answer here from you, but so you're giving that onus on them that they're accountable to come up with an answer if they possibly can. But overall, moreover, you're indicating to the entire class that saying I don't know is not going to be acceptable here, and we really need to focus and to really make something happen. I'm reasonable as a teacher. I'm going to work with you. You can even reach out to someone else. You can work together. We can collaborate. But we have to do more than say, I don't know, and try to cop out, so to speak, of responding to a question. So think about implementing this in your field experiences and see if this can work for you. To continue the learning and probe just a little more deeply, I have posted 2 resources on the Blackboard page for today's class. First, I've posted a link to a video that highlights and briefly explains the features and how to use the StickPick app when you're questioning in your class. I also linked to a brief article on EBSCOhost that discusses wait time during questioning. It may take this just a little bit deeper and provide another perspective. Let's wrap up today's class with a class activity online. To further discuss and process all this information that we've looked at today regarding strategies and questioning and also the use of wait time, let's do the following. I provided a discussion board in Blackboard on today's class. Let's discuss questioning strategies and techniques. Let's talk about the importance of wait time, and let's talk about your priorities to improve your classroom questions. I also provided some starter questions on the discussion board to help get the conversation started. Hope you enjoyed today's class. Look forward to seeing you at our next class and online.